This is Josh Freeman, joined by Daniel Palin. How you doing, Daniel?
I'm very well, Josh. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty well. We're both in Bulgaria right now, and it's been freezing lately. There's been this celebration going on for the start of March,
Yes,
which is
that's
also
right.
supposed to be the start of spring, but I just don't get it, because there's a blizzard outside, and it's been snowing for, the past 3 or 4 days.
That's right. Non-stop. Non-stop. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But what is the name of this celebration?
This thing's called Baba Marta,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't really get it. I know that you're supposed to wear some little string or rope around your wrist or clip something onto your shirt.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're supposed to look for some bird in a tree, and I don't know, it brings you good luck or something. I don't get it. I've read some stories about it, but I do know that it's supposed to signify the start of spring, and they should move that back to like June or something, because spring clearly does not start in
Yeah,
March in Bulgaria.
that's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. So, and these things, they're called martinitsas, correct?
Yeah, they're called
Yeah.
martinitsas, these little things that you wear around your wrist or clip them onto
Mm-hmm.
your shirt or whatever you do with them.
Yeah.
I don't profess to have any sort of knowledge worth a darn about it.
It's red and white good luck charms, but I don't think that there's much to get. So let's move on to the topic of the day.
Alright, we just got back from Macedonia.
Mm-hmm.
We were there for 2 nights in the capital city of Skopje,
That's
is
right.
the name. And you for a while had talked about going to Skopje. I thought the idea was a little odd, because as far as Balkan capitals go, I didn't think there was much to write home about with regard to Skopje.
No, no.
But it is close by, and I found a convenient opportunity to go this week,
Mhm.
and we did. But why don't you share with the audience why you've been
Mhm.
telling me that we should go to Skopje?
Yes, why indeed? Why indeed? And it's a very good question because I would have asked the same myself 2 years ago, but last year in 2014, there was a campaign initiated by the president, the prime minister of Macedonia. What's his name again? Remind me, please.
His name is Nikola Gruevski.
Nikola Gruevski. So this gentleman, he started a campaign called Skopje 2014. And this campaign has had the aim of putting Skopje on the map, on the tourist trail. And part of this involved the construction of a lot of buildings and essentially a rewriting of Macedonian history. But that really wasn't the reason that I wanted to go. I wanted to go because because the campaign involved the construction of a large number of classical buildings, classical revival buildings, which are common all over the Western world. You can look at the White House, for example, or St. Paul's Cathedral, and all sorts of other buildings which have these influences. And I just wanted to see those as they would have appeared at the time of construction, because a lot of these were constructed, 100, 200, 300 years ago. So seeing something new and the way that it was meant to be appreciated was something that I wanted to experience, which I did, and I'm very pleased with the experience. So I hope that that's a justifiable enough reason to go.
Okay, so we went to check out the new architecture
Yes.
that's in Skopje, Macedonia.
Mm-hmm.
And to say the least, it seemed pretty odd.
Yes. What were your first impressions?
It seemed completely out of place. There were an absurd amount of statues. Some of them, I think, the audience will be able to see in the podcast photo that we've got up.
Mm-hmm.
There were statues everywhere.
Absolutely.
Across every bridge, which, by the way, there's there's a river that runs right through the center of town.
Hmm.
It's called the Vardar River,
Yes.
and it's very nice.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
It's a nice touch. It's
Mhm.
not the Danube, but it was a pretty sight. So they've got all these bridges that go
Yeah.
across the river in the center of town. And I think I might actually use the term they're littered with statues.
Yes, yes, littered is probably the right term because, there's so many of them, and it seems as though they were just dumped around almost randomly. Because, some of them do belong. For instance, there's this big statue of Alexander the Great in the middle of the central square. That makes sense.
That one was quite fitting, and
Yes.
it's gorgeous, and there should be a picture of that in the podcast
Mhm.
coming up. The Alexander the Great statue is right in the center of the town square,
Yes.
and it looks fine and dandy, and it belongs there.
Mhm.
But all these statues that were just placed on the bridges, on pedestrian streets,
Yeah.
just anywhere around the city center, it actually reminded me, not that I don't think I've been to any country in which there's a classic dictatorship, but I got the image of being in some authoritarian country. Maybe they don't have statues. Maybe they don't have like 10 statues
Mhm.
per block in authoritarian countries, but I do get the image of the dear leader
Yes.
or the president. There being a
Yes.
grand statue of him
Mhm.
in the town square, and that's what this kind of reminded me of.
Yeah. And it's, in a way, an attempt to celebrate the glory of the nation. However, stable that base may be, which, once again, is common in a lot of dictatorships. I mean, look at North Korea, look at the former Soviet Union, and all of these incredible buildings that they built precisely for this purpose, to demonstrate the glory that the country can express.
All right, we'll get to the nationalistic
Mhm.
politics
Yes.
in a little bit, and there's no shortage of that.
Absolutely.
Nationalism was probably the theme of the entire trip to Macedonia.
Mhm.
But I'd like to get your take on these buildings, the neoclassical buildings. Did they meet your expectations?
Did they meet my expectations?
Will they stand beyond the next 20 years?
Mhm.
Are they phony?
Ah.
I mean, I don't know. Tell us something about these buildings, what they're actually like.
What can I tell you? They're like, so... Yes, they
You
are,
were-
in a sense, a classical revivalist.
But you were literally looking for cracks in the wall to see if they were going to fall down in 5 years.
Yes, I did look because it was very suspicious because the whole thing cost, what, $500 million? Not...
I've seen various numbers, but
Yes.
everything that I saw seemed way too low.
Absolutely, absolutely. For instance, we went to the archaeological museum, this fantastic building, which probably is the centerpiece to the whole thing.
Probably, yes.
It's one of the grander buildings, and it only cost them 17 million euros to build.
Well, that's what they say.
Yes.
And it was very kind of them to
Mhm.
actually answer us there.
Yeah.
Then we went a little bit later to this nationalistic museum that's
Mhm.
more about modern Macedonian history.
Yes.
And we walk in, and rather politely, we weren't joking or trying to be dicks or piss them off or anything, but we're very curious about the economics. Macedonia is a very poor country.
Yes. High unemployment.
It's trying to get into the EU,
Mhm.
and it's got many obstacles, a couple of which we'll talk about
Yes.
in this video, but the economy is definitely a problem there. So we're just curious, how'd you pay for all these expensive buildings? And we
Mhm.
politely asked them, how much did this cost, or how'd you come up with the money for this?
Yeah.
And what did they say?
What did they say? What did they say? Well,
I remember what they said. They said that something like, instead of asking about that, you should be learning
Mhm.
about the Macedonian struggle for liberation. Don't be asking us questions about how much this cost or how we paid for it.
Yes. So once again, this goes back to the whole benevolent dictatorship idea. It's like, okay, move along, stop asking questions, and admire the scenery.
Macedonian politics are actually in complete turmoil. We didn't really get into this while we were there, although being that I'm a journalist and I'm interested in the region, I tried asking a few questions, trying to get a little bit of a pulse, but a little bit of background.
Mhm.
Right now in Macedonia, the opposition party is revealing these grand new corruption allegations every week for the past 6 or 7 weeks. They've been releasing all these wiretaps, these wiretap conversations in which they accuse Gruevski of dictating what the media reports, of handing out actually all the contracts
Right.
for Skopje 2014 to his buddies, all kinds of corruption allegations. And at the same time, Gruevski's accusing the opposition guys of basically being part of a CIA coup to overthrow him. So to say the least, Macedonia is in a bit of turmoil right now.
Yes.
And when we walk about a mile from the Skopje 2014 project, still within basically the city center, we see basically cardboard boxes.
Yes.
They're not straw huts, but I mean, what were there?
What were there? Well, I wasn't paying too much attention to the outskirts of Skopje itself, but what really struck me was the town that we went through once we had finally crossed into Macedonia. We'll get onto the border crossing itself a little bit later. But, you know, this town was, yes, very poor. It reminded me of parts of Latin America. And and one thing that I noticed,
By the
particularly
way,
about the agriculture,
let me just
yes.
jump in really quickly. Macedonian nationalists, we know you're out there. We apologize. We did not do our homework. We don't know the name of this town. All right, you can continue.
Okay, so and as we rolled through this town, I noticed something very striking, extremely striking. I did see people working in the fields, which is always nice. It's good to see people engaging in, you know, economic activity. But there was almost a total lack of machinery or tools. They're doing almost everything manually, which was very curious. It's very much like medieval Europe still. So hopefully this will change. Hopefully Macedonia will become a much wealthier country. But at the moment, it's clear that it's not very well off. The economy is not in the best of shapes, and you know, it is in need of some maintenance. For instance, you know, we were going along this river, and there was garbage the entire way.
Oh yeah, that was funny.
For hundreds of, well, not, it felt like hundreds of miles, but for long distance.
Well, it's tiny country. It wasn't that much, but then we get in the city center, and we're walking along basically the boardwalk next to the river, and it's really gorgeous. Yeah. You've got the river, you got these nice bike paths and greenery, and then you look down and you see all this trash on the grass right next to the river, and some of it floating down the river. So I just found the photo. I took this little... Right. It wasn't planned, but it was a sequence of 2 photos. One was the statue of the Alexander the Great statue in the city square, and it just so happened that the very following photo after that on my phone is just, it's a shack. It's a rundown shack, and it's probably no more than 1 or 2 miles away from these brand new buildings.
Yes, that's right.
In the city center.
That's right.
So it shows that these buildings, to me, I kept saying they looked so phony. Yes. I kept using the word phony. And because of that, I started saying that this place reminds me of Las Vegas.
Yeah, Caesar's Palace. Personally, it reminds me of Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. But the whole spirit, but, you know, when you go to Las Vegas... you see all of these incredible buildings which are totally out of place.
And that's what it is
Yeah.
in Skopje. I'm by saying Las Vegas, I'm not saying we see a bunch of casinos and prostitutes walking around dropping their little
Yeah.
business cards on the ground. You don't go to Macedonia for gambling and for sex and big parties.
No.
But the architecture is gorgeous, but it just seems so out of place. And that's why I started saying it looks like Las Vegas. And then lo and behold, I go on the Wikipedia page for Skopje 2014, and it says that one of the criticisms of the project is they made the place look like Las Vegas.
Yeah, which it does feel very much like it, especially, once you move away from the Strip in Las Vegas, suddenly, you're somewhere that is actually quite poor and you see people struggling. Only a few 100 feet away from this main strip, which is exactly the same in Skopje. As soon as you get away from Skopje 2014, from the center of all of this amazing new architecture.
Yeah, as soon as you leave Skopje 2014 and you enter Skopje 2015, suddenly reality hits you.
Yes, that's right. That's right. That's right. But what are the positives? What are the positives?
This place is worth your while as a tourist.
Yes.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the culture. I've been in Bulgaria for the past 6 months, and we crossed over into Macedonia, and even though they talk so much, I shouldn't say Macedonians, just like the government propagandists talk so much about how evil Bulgaria is. The culture is strikingly similar. The language is almost identical.
Yeah.
The food is very similar in a good way. And the people seem very warm there.
Yeah.
I liked hanging out in that one grill we went to.
Yeah,
it seemed like you could just hang out, shoot the shit. The guy's got his football game on. You can talk politics. You can talk whatever. Very down to earth.
Yes.
They have a nice little cafe culture surrounding the square and the river and the city center. They've got all these pedestrian streets, which if we come back in the summer, it's probably gorgeous and a very, very good place to to hang out. It's a very walkable city.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's actually very, very nice, the city center. Not just the Skopje 2014 area, but the rest of it does have a certain feel to it. It's very cozy.
It does have a little bit of that ancient feel mixed in with all the modernity.
Yeah.
Because it's got the old stone bridge, as they call it, and then it's got that castle.
Yes, yes. Now, regarding the culture, I would actually disagree with you on that part and say that they're actually quite different. In one way in which they're different is if you look at the architecture. I did feel as though the architecture was very different. For instance,
different than what?
Lawns are more common. The houses are also a lot closer together in certain towns than in Bulgaria, and there are a lot more houses or these small apartment blocks as opposed to the larger ones found in not only in Sofia but the rest of Bulgaria.
Well, to be fair, Sofia's a city of more than 1 million. Skopje's got what, like 600,000.
Yeah.
And Skopje just seems much smaller.
That's right. It does feel a lot smaller. That's right. And regarding the people, Bulgarians I found are generally quite cold. Once you get to know them, they'll be very warm. But if you don't, then they'll be cold. Whereas in Macedonia, I did find them to be a lot more willing to be open.
All right,
initially.
since I didn't know that this was going to be a podcast about Bulgaria, but since we're comparing Bulgaria to Macedonia, I must say this,
Yes.
that going there, or at least going into these museums and talking with, dare I say, these propagandists,
Hmm.
it was the first time that I really felt like I was in the Balkans. Yes, I've been in the Balkans for the past 6 months,
Uh-huh.
and I've seen the poverty, and I've the culture is it's very similar. The
Hmm.
food, yeah, I'm getting used to all that, even the language
Yeah.
a bit. But being there in former Yugoslavia, in a country that's been fighting for its existence, in a country whose name is debatable, and we can touch on that. The ethnic tension was there. It was in the air.
Yeah.
As a tourist, you can feel it.
Hmm.
Maybe as an everyday Macedonian, you don't feel it. But as a tourist, you
Yeah.
just get shoved into this ethnic tension.
Hmm. And apparently, in certain towns, Muslims go to some cafes, Macedonians go to others. So and also, you're not defined necessarily according to your ethnicity over there. So on the census pages, you're either Macedonian or Muslim, which they equate to Turkish, because Macedonia was under Ottoman rule for a long time, and there's still a very strong Muslim presence, and some segregation in a sense, which is very strange.
Well, it's got all kinds of ethnic dynamics
Hmm.
going on because
Yes.
the Muslim presence is from the Albanians, and
Hmm.
a lot of Albanians came in during the Kosovo War
Right.
around 99 or 2000 or around then,
Hmm.
and I think in 2001
Yeah.
they actually the Albanians coming from Kosovo
Hmm.
started to stage some uprisings, and it was of note because Macedonia was the only former Yugoslav republic
Hmm.
to basically break away without getting caught up in the wars of the 90s.
Oh wow.
And that's neat.
Yeah.
But when we go into the museum, it's like they're already in an information war,
Yes.
and if they had a military, they'd be gearing up for for a hot war
Yes.
because they're taking aim at Bulgaria.
Hmm.
They're taking aim for sure at Greece, and
Hmm.
we need to explain that briefly.
Yes.
They've definitely got beef with Serbia.
Hmm.
Okay, so while we're in this nationalist museum,
So
the
what
guy
was the
the
name of
guy's
the
giving
museum again? It was the Museum of National of Macedonian
the
Struggle.
Macedonian struggle for liberation. I
Yeah.
believe that's what it's called. Tell people what happened with that Greek lady.
So what
there.
happened with the Greek lady? Okay, so we need a little bit of context. So now the borders of Macedonia can be defined in several ways. I mean, as anybody who studied history knows, borders change all the time. People move, and Macedonia is not one of those exceptions. And walking through the museum, it seemed as though the government of Macedonia believes that the province of Greece, called Macedonia, which is actually bigger than the country itself.
Greece has got a state or province called the Republic of Macedonia, and it's in the north, and I believe it includes Thessaloniki,
Hmm.
and it borders Macedonia and Bulgaria.
Yes, and Turkey. Um, so it seemed as though this museum claimed this part of Macedonia as being truly part of Macedonia, which is, I guess, is reasonable. I mean, a lot of Macedonians there historically. It was considered as part of it. But this Greek lady suddenly interrupted our guide, and she disagreed with him wholeheartedly. She disagreed with him on absolutely every point, and it did get quite heated. I will let you give the details because I don't remember the exact details.
Well, to give the Greek perspective, I always ask, how far do you want to take back these territorial disputes? To give the Greek perspective, or at least some of it. I surely don't understand all of it, but some
Yeah.
of it is Macedonia was a Greek city-state back in the times of Alexander the Great and all
Ah.
that stuff. And during the rule of Macedon the Second, who was Alexander the Great's father,
Mm-hmm.
and he's got
Philip the Second.
excuse me, Philip the Second of Macedon. He's got a prominent statue in Skopje too. Then suddenly Macedonia made a power play. This is back in the 300s BC,
Yeah.
and they conquered Greece.
Mm-hmm.
And Alexander the Great stretched the empire all the way to India.
Yes.
So there are all kinds of territorial disputes going on. But anyway, so this Greek lady who was on the tour with us basically says, I came here to listen, to learn the Macedonian perspective, but you won't listen to me, and so this is never going to work out.
Yeah.
And the tour guide refused to actually explain the Greek perspective, and they just went at it, and it was very fitting.
Absolutely.
The ethnic tension was bubbling inside that museum.
Yes, absolutely.
And it felt nice to bathe in, because I really felt like I was in the Balkans for once.
And you know what? Something has just come to my mind, which I hadn't realized at the time, but at that museum, they insisted that we be guided.
I did not think of that. You're right. When we walked into the Ancient History Museum, they offered us to let us walk around on our own or with a guide. But that one, it wasn't so much of a guide as a government handler.
Yes, that's right. But that said, the archaeological museum isn't necessarily unbiased, because they were claiming all sorts of great peoples, which is fair enough, which is fair. So many people that I would have associated with other empires or states. So who did they claim? So okay, naturally they claimed Alexander the Great and his father. But they also claimed the dynasty that Cleopatra belonged to, Queen Cleopatra of Egypt, who we know from popular fiction, pop culture. They also claimed Justinian, as well as Plato. And I imagine that they would have claimed all sorts of other people had they had the chance, which is very interesting. And I was told that this whole campaign is an attempt to rewrite Macedonian history and change their identity from a Balkan identity to a classical one. And I imagine that they would probably want to do this in order to justify wider borders and perhaps going back to the former glory days of Alexander the Great's empire.
Really quickly, yes. We're running out of time, but I gotta go over it. Macedonia has got a major diplomatic crisis in that it's known in the UN and in diplomatic circles as FYROM, which stands for the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. So it's not even addressed diplomatically as Macedonia, the Republic of Macedonia, because Greece objects to it. And that's a big issue with getting into the EU. And it's something, dare I say, that a lot of Macedonians are butthurt about.
Which is understandable.
Very understandable. Yeah. But I do agree with you, and I put out a YouTube video talking about it, that the Skopje 2014 project seems to be a statement to all of Macedonia's rival countries, which include Greece, but also Bulgaria, definitely Serbia.
Yes.
Anyway, we've got less than a minute left. I want to touch very briefly on logistics.
Yes.
Travel there was tougher than we expected. We got caught at the border.
Yes, for about
for like 2 or 3 hours. So we're learning quickly that these places in the Balkans are very close together.
Yeah.
But train travel's a joke, and transportation takes a while.
Yes.
But I do have to give a shout out to the to the
Host.
host.
Yes.
We stayed at a great place,
Yeah.
and we're gonna drop a link below.
Yeah.
Maybe even a photo. Airbnb right over the city center. Signing out. This is Josh and Daniel.